But yes, that is the plane that they use when he and staff are traveling around.
Is it the double-decker ones?
It's not truly double-decker. I mean, it's
like the British Airways one where there's like a little first-class cabin behind, and then it's everybody, all us plebes down below.
Correct. There's like when you look at it, there's maybe a dozen or so windows up there.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the later versions, they actually elongated the bulge, to where it is a little more double-deckery looking. And there's more of that.
I just think that's the British Airways from like the early 2000s is like what I think of when I think of this plane.
Got it. You want to see a weird one with a bulge on it? Look up pictures.
I don't want to see anything weird with bulges.
No. Look up the Dreamliner. That is the weirdest plane in the world. The one or not the Dreamliner. It's the what is the newest plane that Boeing is making?
It's the Dreamliner.
Well, what is they have a name for the plane? I
know the one you mean.
It is literally a 747 with another 747 stacked on top of it.
And
it is the oddest
looking. The
looking.
nose flips up and all that stuff.
Crazy looking. If you want to see a weird plane, look that thing up.
Okay.
But we were already way off topic. It's going to be a long show. As I said, the plane was scheduled to leave JFK at 7 o'clock, but it was delayed because of mechanical issues with engine number 3.
It was about to explode.
No, but eventually. The ground crew fixed the issue, and at 8:02 p.m., it was given clearance to leave the gate, and at 8:19 p.m., TWA Flight 800 left the ground. It followed its expected flight path by heading briefly south. And if you don't know, JFK International Airport is right on the ocean. So they almost immediately, when they head south, they're out over the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So this all takes place over the ocean. But they go south very briefly, and then they change heading, and they go in a generally northeasterly trajectory.
Parallel to the coast of Long Island.
Yep, that's exactly
actually,
it.
the flight path of 800 takes it right past Plum Island. Very close.
I did notice that when I was the stuff.
Yeah.
That was accidental.
Does it matter which engine is engine number 3?
It does not.
Okay.
That actually doesn't play into anything.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, totally. So the plane takes off, and the flight time lasts for about 13 minutes. Now, it's a nice July evening in New York, so of course there's quite a few people out and about, and at the time that Flight 800 or TWA 800 is in the air, 700 or 800 people are out and about and happen to be looking in the direction of where the plane would be flying along the coastline. And these people reported that at 8:31 p.m. they saw some of them, I should say, not all of these people.
Not all 700 to 800 of them?
Not all, more like around 50 to 100, depending on the accountings. But they reported that they saw something rising from the horizon on a generally upward trajectory.
At 8:31, exactly. Like that was the thing where they were like, I looked at my clock.
They were like, it's like 8:30 or 8:31. You know, it's been pinned down that way.
Okay.
But let's just say a lot of these people. I mean, some of them were like standing on the beach on Long Island. Some of them were like way inland, like 10 miles inland, that kind of thing. So
they're all over.
Something rising from the horizon is different for the guy that was like way up in Brooklyn versus the guy that was standing on the beach.
Correct.
On Long Island.
That's absolutely correct.
Totally different thing.
Oh yeah. No, that does play a part, and that'll actually come up later on in our theory section.
I think Joe's just setting the stage.
Yeah,
trying to.
And now to address what Joe says in terms of like what these things would look like from different perspectives, some of these people said they thought it looked like a distress flare. Others said they thought it looked like cheap fireworks, and a number of people actually said they thought it looked like a missile flying up into the sky. And they described as a bright white light that came up from the horizon.
Although some people described it as a red light, too.
Yeah, there is a red light. Yeah, it changes color.
Yeah.
But it went generally upwards, or in some instances upwards, and then kind of at a 45-degree angle. So there's a lot of, it's very loose in terms of exactly what the flight path of this supposed object was. After a couple of seconds of watching this thing fly into the sky, they watched it suddenly erupt into a fireball and then plummet towards the ocean. And after a couple of seconds, that fireball split into two. It split into two pieces. And then those pieces continued to fall into the ocean. And that, of course, was the explosion of TWA Flight 800. And what they saw was the flames and then it splitting into multiple parts as it crashed. Now, the people on the shore, they weren't the only ones to see this happen. There were people in boats at
I would
the
imagine
time.
a lot of people saw this happen. The actual explosion of the
Right.
plane.
The actual event.
Yeah.
There were people who were in boats on the water nearby. There's also a couple of pilots. One, I know there's a helicopter pilot from the Coast Guard and a couple of commercial pilots. There's a number of pilots. They reported it. But the boaters were nearby, and they immediately went to the crash site to try to help. They couldn't do much, though, because the water was literally on fire. And if you go out and Google this, you'll see the images of pieces of wreckage floating in the water, and there's flames all over, because the jet fuel that was on fire is floating on top of the water. And so these guys couldn't get in there to try to help survivors,
Yeah.
which was their aim. Understandably.
That unfortunately.
That and looting.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
No, there was definitely
They were
no
trying to
looting.
help. Yeah.
I'm sure most of them were trying to loot, actually. Yeah.
But there was a lot of stuff floating on the surface, and as you can imagine, it wasn't just parts of the plane, it was luggage and it was bodies. There were a total of 230 people on board the aircraft when it went down, and none survived. So,
Not surprising. It was
yeah,
kind of a hard crash.
It's a very catastrophic event.
Yeah.
And at the time that it happened, this was the second worst aircraft accident in U.S. history. 5 years, it no longer is. I mean, 5 years later, with United Airlines Flight 175 and American Airlines Flight 11, again 5 years later at 9/11, those numbers were massively, they just went down. They dropped down the rankings very quickly.
Well, do they? Yeah. So they count. They must count like the total loss of life in those ones.
I am
Or is
guessing.
it just the flight? It must be.
I'm
Because I'm
guessing.
sure there were more people on the TWA flight than there were on either of those two actual planes.
Yeah, I don't think those were stuffed full.
No, those
I
weren't stuffed
remember.
full, but I
Yeah.
do believe that
I
it's the
suspect.
total disaster. I think is the way it's described.
Yeah,
That's why.
that was
But,
a pretty bad one.
Yeah. So, like I said, there's people on the water, and at that point, and a massive search and rescue operation is launched, an official one, and police and civilian boats are out there. Eventually, it's military vessels. They're combing the area. At first, they're looking for survivors. Once they realize that they're not going to find any survivors, they are trying to recover both wreckage and the bodies of the
Yeah.
people who were killed in the accident.
Plus looting. Yeah.
To Devon.
Okay, we won't say
And
it
Joe.
anymore.
Yeah.
I can't take full credit for
It's
this.
true.
No.
Okay, so here's normally how this stuff goes down is normally when there's an accident with an airplane, the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, which was what we're going to call them from here on out, they'd come out to the scene and they'd investigate to determine what happened and, more importantly, how to prevent it from happening again. And I feel like a lot of people may not really know that the NTSB is out there, but you've seen their handiwork. You've seen reconstructed planes after an accident, and they're the guys who do that. Giant bottles of super glue is their friend. They put these things back together to figure out what went wrong so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it's just like a giant model for a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Except like way worse.
Yeah.
Well, except it's got blood and stuff on it, but yeah.
The wreckage of Flight 800, TWA Flight 800, it fell into three rather distinct zones. This is the way that they categorized it. They were the red, the yellow, and the green zones. The red zone was basically directly underneath where the explosion happened. This is important if you ever go in and read the documentation from the NTSB and their final report. And of course the conspiracy documentaries will make reference to it. The yellow zone was very small, and in the it was the eastern corner of the red zone, sort of.
That was kind of like in the northeastern corner of it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell on their little drawing. And then the farthest east would be the green zone. It was obviously much farther along than either of them. The front of the plane was in the red zone, so that's the first zone. A little bit more of the plane right around where the wings join the body of the plane, that section, that was in the yellow zone. And then everything rear of there, so the tail, the wings, the majority of the fuselage of the plane were actually in the green zone.
That's very counterintuitive to me, isn't it?
It is, and we will talk about that.
Okay.
I know, yeah. It seems weird the way that's distributed.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that I'm pointing that out because I don't know that people are necessarily tracking. The plane was headed east, but the front of the plane landed most westerly.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most westerly.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that works.
Pretty sure
Yeah,
that's correct.
close enough.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a technical term.
It is the term.
Okay.
It's the nautical term.
So we talked about all those folks that were out there and saw this light come up from the horizon, and they saw the explosion, and they were not shy about telling the authorities that they had seen something like this, and because that shouldn't be happening. And that, of course, got the attention of the U.S. government, most specifically the FBI. The thing is that this, what they describe makes everybody wonder if this was an act of terror, if this plane was brought down intentionally.
Well, I got to tell you, it was before the reports of possible missiles came out. I mean, that night I was talking to a friend on the phone because I was alive when this happened, believe it or not.
We all were.
We all were.
Yeah, and he's
less
like,
cognizant than
yeah,
us.
but he's like, yeah, turn on your TV. There's a huge plane crash in New York, and I turned it on. This has just happened.
Right.
They got helicopters out there, nobody knows what had happened. Nobody said anything about missiles.
Right.
And yeah, still he's saying to me, terrorism. I mean, he was dead sure at that time that it was terrorism.
Which is really funny when you think about how, that's before the terror alert became a thing, but everybody just planes don't just come down out of the sky.
They don't just explode like that.
Yeah, they don't just, so something had to have caused it. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and this is not everybody acts like 9/11, there was no terrorism before then.
No.
I was going to say, there was the original attack on the World Trade Center.
The World Trade Center.
It was right then, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that's 93, but I could be off.
Yeah, I mean, around, within a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, there had been a lot of stuff. I think the Khobar terrorist and towers attack in Saudi Arabia had happened just right before that.
Yeah.
I mean, there was all kinds of bombs going off around the world.
There had been a building, things like, what's his name, who did the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
That had only been a couple of years prior. So people immediately, when something of this scale happens, are like, that's not normal. Somebody did that.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Who the hell was it?
Yeah.
And that is, it's viewed as terrorism because it is.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's considered as it's a crime. And the NTSB doesn't have the jurisdiction to investigate a criminal action. So the FBI had to come in. But here's the thing, the FBI, their forte is not figuring out what brings down planes and reconstructing them. So while there may have been a lot of camaraderie in the beginning, according to some people who were involved, as time wore on, there was more and more friction through lack of communication and different methods of operation, and maybe lack of knowledge of what goes on when you reconstruct a plane. So they're in there. Now, here's the thing. This investigation, it took a long time. The FBI, they help out. It takes about 10 months to recover all of the bodies, and they, the ones that weren't on the surface were about 150 feet down. And then
luckily, I mean, most of them were still in the plane itself, right?
That did help out a lot in
handy.
recovering those bodies. In 1997, the FBI would come out, so this is a year and several months, they would come out and say, listen, we couldn't find any sign of foul play, so we don't think someone brought the plane down intentionally, so we're closing our investigation, and NTSB, you're on. It's your show. Go. Dance.
I mean, it's likely they said, and if you find anything that contradicts that, let us know, and we'll come back.
Maybe. They might have. But
I'm sure if they were like, and if you find a giant missile hole, let us know, and we will come investigate some more. But right now, we don't have any proof of that,
Nope.
so we're tired of this. We're leaving.
Exactly.
You guys are a bunch of nerds who are trying to put your thing back together. Right. You do that. We're going to go do other stuff.
I got to say, given some of my other observations about the FBI, 10 months is actually a pretty brief investigation for those guys.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It really is.
I'm sure they were just tired of fighting.
Probably pretty quick.
There was probably
NTSB.
a little bit of pressure from the government too to probably issue some sort of a finding to put all the conspiracy stuff to.
You want your citizens to feel safe traveling, especially by air. That's a huge portion of the economy.
Yeah.
And if people are, for a year sitting there thinking, but every plane is getting shot out of the sky, or
Yeah.
maybe one plane, but it could be the plane I get onto. I'm not getting on an airplane anymore. I don't know. I didn't bother to do any research into the economic impact of this attack. If it really had a dent in. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I know
I
what you're
think after
getting at.
9/11, people stopped taking airplanes for a while because they were so scared.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of, I can totally understand why the FBI would be like, we got to get ahead of
Yeah,
this
we're out.
right now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna speed things along here a little bit because these investigations are very, very meticulous and they take a long time. The NTSB would finally render their findings in August of 2000, so that's, 4 years later?
Yeah.
That's a long time, and there's a lot of information. Like Joe said earlier, their report on this, their final report, is over 300 pages long. There was an interim report or two that were put out. So there's tons of information out there. I'm gonna try and cook this down to as simple and basic or short a time as I can, and we're still gonna be here for a while.
Yeah, we are.
All right.
So here's what they say caused the explosion: a faulty wire.
Sure.
I remember. Yeah. A little short circuit.
747s, as with a lot of large aircraft, don't carry their fuel in external tanks like you'll see on some smaller aircraft. Instead, they store it in the wings and a portion of the fuselage underneath where the passengers sit, the body of the plane. And it's just simple flight economics. I mean, you don't ever see jumbo planes like that because a big tank causes air drag, which slows you down and requires more fuel to get where you're going.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it makes just total sense
Yeah.
in terms of fuel economy and efficiency.
Well, and you also put it in the wings because that's kind of the fulcrum of the plane. It's where it balances. So you
And
don't.
it gives them some rigidity.
Yeah, you
that
don't
helps
put it.
them out that way
you
as
don't put
well.
it way in the back because as the tank empties and your tail becomes light, or things
Yeah.
like that, and then you got to deal with that, and that causes drag and yada yada. So yeah, in the wings.
Although
structure.
I was
Yeah.
reading somewhere, it sounds like they do actually keep some fuel in the tail, believe it or not.
Well,
Which
some.
was surprising to me.
Well,
it just
actually,
seems too far away.
You could use your. Well, they might do it as a trim tank kind of situation.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, gas in the tail.
Yeah.
It's too far away.
Yeah.
We don't have any kind
Do
of
you know how
mechanism
long
to
it
get
takes
that
to
to
walk
travel.
to the back of the plane? Come on.
Yeah, well, you're not vacuum
That's
sealed.
because you're
so.
drunk. That's why. But I mean, yeah. I can,
Okay.
Oh, God.
So,
Sorry.
Okay, let's get back on track. So why is it important that I'm telling you about this fuel tank
yeah, we want to know
situation?
that, Steve.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it is because one of the inside of what is known as the center wing tank, that's the one that's in the body of the plane, there is a small pump that's, assists in the process of moving fuel around. And there isn't much in terms of wiring in there, but there was a wire, and it appears to have caused a short. And that wire happened also, wires are interconnected everywhere. And one of the things they point to show that it was probably that particular wire is it goes into a bundle that runs up into the cockpit and controls the fuel quantity indicator system, the gas gauge.
Yeah.
They refer to it as the FQIS, but it's the gas gauge. And because the tank wasn't completely full and the short is going on, one of the pilots is saying, look at these weirdo readings that I'm getting on the gauge for the center wing tank. This is just a minute or two prior to the explosion.
Pretty sure
Yeah.
that's verbatim.
And then when that spark arced, there was vapor fuel in there. So it wasn't the liquid fuel, but the vaporized version of it.
Which
just
is pretty
like
flammable.
Which is always flammable. I actually watched a thing today, a guy taking jet fuel and a lighter and a match and sticking it in the fuel and not igniting.
Yeah.
But as soon as he misted it across the flame, it
done.
lit right up.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
saying that what happened is that vapor hit that spark that caused the explosion, which ignited the about 300 pounds of liquid fuel that was in the center wing tank, and it tore the plane apart just in front of the wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say.
So, remember we talked about in the red, yellow, and the green zone?
Yeah.
Okay, the nose of the front of the plane was ripped off in the initial explosion. the following probably second or third explosion, or portion of that explosion, ripped off another, say, about 20 or 30 foot section of the plane that included the shoulders where they join up with the plane and some of the landing gear.
Yeah.
And then
some seats.
Yeah, and of course, and everything that was in that area.
But essentially, yeah, it was the nose and then this giant ring of fuselage. It was just a big ring.
And then what the NTSB says happened, so it was the nose went down into